The shelter smelled like bleach and loneliness. Emma stood in the doorway, clutching the sleeves of her too big jacket, her sneakers leaving tiny wet prints on the concrete floor. Rows of cages stretched out in front of her, tails wagging, noses pressed against bars, desperate barks echoing like unanswered questions. But Emma barely noticed. Her eyes had locked onto one corner. A dog, still, silent. He didn't bark, didn't rush the gate. Just sat his head low, his coat a faded patchwork of gold and black, his gaze steady but far away, the card on his cage read, Blaze, retired K9, age 7, not recommended for adoption by families with children. Emma didn't read the warning, or maybe she did and didn't care. She walked toward him, her steps soft against the cold floor. When she stopped in front of the cage, Blaze lifted his head slightly, not curious, not eager, just seeing, really seeing. Emma pressed her palm to the cold metal. Blaze didn't move for a long moment. Then, slowly, he stood. He crossed the distance to her hand like a soldier returning from a war no one asked him to fight, their fingers and fermet steel bars between them. But in that instant, Emma felt something she hadn't felt since the day she was taken from her mother's house. Not fear, not sadness, recognition. A whisper between broken things, I know you. And in the hollow hum of the shelter lights, Emma made a silent promise. I'll find a way, you won't be forgotten. Emma had learned early not to expect much. Not birthday parties, not bedtime stories. Not goodnight kisses, just survival. Her mother loved her, once, loved her in the way broken people sometimes do. With too much silence and too many empty promises. The state stepped in when Emma was 6. A neighbor heard the shouting, called someone. After that, it was a parade of strangers, social workers, foster homes. Paperwork she wasn't old enough to read, decisions she wasn't old enough to make. Everywhere she went, people told her how resilient she was. How brave. Emma didn't feel brave. She felt invisible. She learned to pack fast. Not to get attached, not to ask too many questions. Smiles were currency, tears were weaknesses. Her current foster family was nice enough. They bought her clothes that almost fit. They asked about school. They left nightlights on. But Emma still kept a bag under her bed just in case. Still measured every kindness like it might be snatched away. Still slept with one hand curled around the zipper of her backpack. Trust was not something she handed out. It was something that had to be earned slowly, carefully, painfully. And now, this dog, this soldier, this battered soul locked in a cage because someone thought he wasn't safe. Emma saw herself in Blaze before she even knew his name. Both of them waiting, both of them labeled as too much trouble. Both of them forgotten by the world that once promised to protect them. And Emma decided, if she couldn't save herself yet, she would save him or die trying. Emma visited the shelter every Saturday. At first, the workers barely noticed her. A small girl with big eyes and silent steps, just another visitor who wouldn't stay long. But Emma stayed, not to pet the puppies that wagged their tails, not to laugh at the tiny kittens batting at the air. She went straight to Blaze's cage every time. She would sit cross-legged on the cold concrete floor, backpack resting in her lap, and simply be there, reading aloud, drawing pictures, whispering stories she made up on the spot. Blaze listened. He didn't wag his tail, didn't bark, didn't perform, but he stayed close to the bars, ears tilted toward her voice, golden eyes never leaving her face. The volunteers started to notice. Mr. Jenkins, the old man who cleaned the cages, said, "That dog's been here 6 months. Hasn't looked at anyone the way he looks at you." Emma didn't answer. She just smiled a small, secret smile, because she knew. Blaze wasn't waiting for a family with a backyard and shiny toys. He was waiting for her. One afternoon, Emma slipped a crumpled drawing through the bars. It was messy, scribbled with crayons. A picture of a small girl holding hands with a big dog under a giant blue sky. Blaze sniffed it, licked it once. Emma's heart clenched so tight she thought it might burst. "Don't worry," she whispered. "I'll come back, I promise." And she did, every Saturday, rain or shine. Because sometimes you don't build trust with grand gestures. Sometimes you build it with a crayon drawing and a promise you refuse to break. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. Emma overheard it standing by the front desk of the shelter, clutching a donation box she had spent the week filling with coins from couch cushions and forgotten purses. The volunteers were talking in hushed voices. "Blaze has to go. He's been here too long. We don't have the funding to keep dogs who don't get adopted. The director already called the transport. He'll be moved to the overflow shelter by the end of next week." Emma froze. Overflow shelters didn't mean better chances. They meant cramped cages, less attention, fewer second chances. She knew what happened to dogs that stayed too long. They didn't get moved again. They disappeared. She clutched the donation box tighter, the edge biting into her palms. Blaze didn't know. He was still sitting in his cage, head resting on his paws, eyes half closed in that exhausted way that said, "I've waited long enough." Emma felt something harden inside her, a decision. She ran to Blaze's cage and dropped to her knees. "I'm not going to let them take you." Blaze lifted his head slowly, looked at her like he understood every word, and for the first time since she met him, he pressed his nose through the bars and rested it against her hand. Emma leaned closer, forehead touching the cold metal. "I'll find a way, I swear." She didn't know how. She didn't have a plan, just a promise. And sometimes, promises were stronger than cages. Emma went home and emptied her backpack onto the floor. 3 crumpled dollar bills, 6 quarters, a handful of pennies and dimes. Not enough, not even close, but she wasn't giving up. She made posters on the backs of old homework assignments. "Help save Blaze. He needs a home. He needs a family." She taped them to streetlights, pinned them on bulletin boards at the grocery store, handed them out at school, even though the other kids stared like she was speaking a different language. Some people smiled kindly, some promised to think about it, most just walked away. Emma didn't blame them. Everyone was busy. Everyone thought someone else would save the day. But she knew better. She set up a lemonade stand on the weekends, charged 50 cents a cup, hung Blaze's picture from the front of the table, his sad golden eyes staring out at every passing car. Some people stopped, some didn't. Some dropped extra bills into her jar without even taking the lemonade. Every night, she counted her money under the thin blanket in her foster room. $12.35, $18.50. $23.75, still not enough, but closer. On Wednesdays, after homework, she visited Blaze. Sometimes she just sat and read aloud. Sometimes she pressed her forehead to the cold bars and closed her eyes. One evening, she whispered, "You're not broken. You're just waiting for someone who knows how to see you." Blaze's tail thumped once against the floor. A soft, exhausted kind of hope, and Emma promised herself again. She would be that someone, no matter what. It was Mr. Jenkins who noticed, the old volunteer who cleaned cages slower than anyone, but saw more than most. One evening, while Emma sat cross-legged in front of Blaze's kennel, whispering stories into the bars, he shuffled over and crouched beside her. For a long moment, he said nothing, just watched Blaze resting his chin against the gate, watching her back. Then, softly, "He's a good boy, you know. Better than the papers say." Emma nodded without looking up. I know. That Mr. Jenkins scratched his chin thoughtfully. Hard to find people who see past the labels. Emma hugged her knees tighter. Hard to find people who stay. The old man's mouth twitched, not a smile, but something like it. "You staying?" Emma lifted her head, met his gaze with all the stubbornness in her small body. "Yes." Mr. Jenkins sat down fully, joints creaking. "Then maybe you deserve a little help." From the pocket of his jacket, he pulled out an envelope. Crumpled, faded, inside, a certificate. "Blaze, retired with honor, signed years ago but never filed. They forgot about this when they moved him here," Mr. Jenkins said. It means he's not supposed to be auctioned off like junk. He's supposed to be adopted by someone willing to see him as family, not a tool. Emma's hands trembled as she took it. But I don't have enough money. Mr. Jenkins winked. Lucky for you, kid. Paperwork talks louder than coins. He tapped the certificate. Bring this with you. Make them see him the way he deserves to be seen. Emma clutched the envelope to her chest. Hope a real, living thing flared inside her. She looked at Blaze. We're not done yet. And for the first time since the day she met him. Blaze stood up, tail wagging low and steady. Because somehow, even after all the forgetting and all the waiting, someone had chosen to remember. The shelter was packed on adoption day. Families wandered between cages. Children pointed at fluffy puppies and tiny kittens. Volunteers smiled too widely, moved too fast. Emma clutched the envelope to her chest, her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum floor. Blaze was still in his corner cage. Still silent, still steady, still waiting. The director, a woman with sharp eyes and a clipboard, stood at the front of the room. She tapped a microphone. Next up, Blaze, retired K-9. Special conditions apply. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. A man stepped forward, tall, well-dressed. A badge clipped to his belt. I'll take him. Good dog like that could guard my warehouse. He didn't look at Blaze. Didn't kneel, didn't see him. Emma's hands shook. The director nodded, ready to sign. Emma stepped forward. Wait. The room fell into a hush. All eyes turned to her. Small, trembling, fierce, the director frowned. Sweetheart, this is an official adoption. Emma raised the envelope, hands shaking, voice steady. He's not for guarding, he's for belonging. She opened the envelope, unfolded the battered certificate, held it high. He was supposed to be adopted into a family, not sold like stuff in a garage. Mr. Jenkins stepped forward too, voice gravelly but sure. She's right, the director hesitated. The man with the badge shrugged. Don't want a broken dog anyway. He turned and walked away. Emma didn't breathe, didn't move, until the director finally sighed and said, Fine, if she can meet the basic adoption requirements, Blaze is hers. Emma blinked, but I don't have the money yet. Mr. Jenkins stepped closer. Maybe the shelter's adoption fee can be waived. In honor of service, another pause. The director tapped her clipboard, then smiled small, but real. Honor deserves honor. She scribbled something, stamped something else. Congratulations, Emma. The room blurred around her. She ran, feet slapping the floor, heart thudding in her ears. Dropped to her knees at Blaze's cage. The door swung open. Blaze didn't rush out. He stepped forward carefully, lowered his head until it pressed against Emma's chest. And stayed. Emma wrapped her arms around him, tangled her fingers in his fur. You're coming home, she whispered. You're already home. The ride home was different this time. No cages, no metal bars. Just Emma in the back seat of her foster family's old minivan. Blaze sprawled across the seat beside her, his heavy head resting in her lap. She kept her hand tangled in his fur the whole ride, afraid that if she let go, he might vanish like so many other things had. But Blaze didn't vanish. He stayed. When they pulled into the driveway, he jumped down carefully, sticking close to her side. Inside the house, the air smelled like cinnamon and soap. Warm, safe. Her foster mom had already set out a bed for Blaze. A big, cushy one near the fireplace. Blaze didn't hesitate. He circled once, lay down, and let out a long, shuddering sigh that seemed to empty years of waiting from his lungs. Emma curled up beside him, the crackle of the fire lulling her into a peace she hadn't known she could feel. Life didn't turn into a fairy tale overnight. There were still hard days. Emma still had nightmares sometimes. Still flinched at slammed doors. Still kept her backpack packed under the bed, just in case. But Blaze was always there. If she woke up crying, he would press his heavy body against her side. If she froze at school, too scared to raise her hand, she would remember how Blaze sat solid and unshaken even in the loudest storms. They built routines together. Morning walks before the sun rose, evening snacks by the fire. Blaze learned how to fetch the mail from the porch, always bringing it back with proud, heavy steps. Emma joined the art club at school. Her first project, a giant painting of Blaze head high, tail proud, golden eyes burning with something fierce and beautiful. Her classmates crowded around it. One boy said, "That's the bravest dog I've ever seen." Emma smiled. Because it wasn't just about Blaze anymore, it was about both of them, braver than they had ever believed possible. At home, her foster parents filled out official papers. On one line under "Do you wish to adopt this child?" they wrote in careful, permanent ink, "Yes." When they told Emma, she didn't say anything at first. She just knelt beside Blaze, buried her face in his fur, and whispered, "We're really home now." Blaze didn't bark, didn't move. He just leaned into her, solid, steady, true, exactly the way family should. Emma wasn't the girl waiting to be saved anymore. She was the girl who had fought for her family. The girl who had stayed when it was easier to run. The girl who had chosen to believe in something steady, even when everything else fell away. At school, when new students were nervous, she sat beside them. Not with loud words, but with quiet presence. The way Blaze had taught her, she started writing stories too. Stories about brave dogs and quiet kids. And finding home in places you didn't expect. One day, her teacher asked if she wanted to read one aloud. Emma stood at the front of the class. Hands trembling slightly, voice small at first. But as she read about Blaze, about the way he stayed, the way he healed without ever saying a word, her voice grew stronger. When she finished, there was a beat of silence, then applause, real, warm, echoing through the room and filling the spaces where fear used to live. That night, she sat in her room with Blaze snoring at her feet. She pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and wrote at the top, Chapter 1, How He Stayed, because she understood now. Staying wasn't about being stuck. It was about choosing to stay, to love, to believe, to build something lasting from all the broken pieces. And Blaze, he wasn't just her dog. He was her co-author, her anchor, her proof that even the most forgotten souls could find their way home. Some stories aren't loud. They don't come with sirens or spotlights. Some stories are built in whispers, in held hands, in quiet promises made in the corner of a shelter or the edge of a bed. Emma and Blaze's story wasn't about rescue in the way people usually think. It was about recognition, to forgotten souls, seeing each other, choosing each other, staying. Even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. Love isn't always fireworks. Sometimes it's a heavy head resting in your lap, a warm body pressed against your side when the nightmares come, a tail that thumps once, just to say, "I see you, I'm not going anywhere." And sometimes, being seen is the bravest kind of love there is. If this story touched something quiet inside you, something tender, something fierce, don't let it end here. Like this video if you believe the strongest love is often the quietest. Share it with someone who might still be waiting for someone to stay. Subscribe for more true stories of resilience, loyalty, and the everyday heroes who walk beside us when the world feels too big. And in the comments, tell us about your Blaze, the one who stayed. The one who saw you when you thought you were invisible. The one who taught you that home isn't a place, it's a feeling. Because somewhere out there, a little girl with big eyes and a hopeful heart is still whispering stories through cold metal bars, waiting for someone to see her, to choose her, to stay. Let the story be the proof that someone always does. Because not all rescues bark, some just stay, and in staying, they save the world, one heart at a time.